Hi everybody. A very good afternoon or evening, depending on what part of the world you are. Most welcome to our webinar for today, which is going to be on ISO 27002, the new controls implementation guidelines. And this is the part two of the webinar for those of you who have attended our part one. So today's webinar, quick things would be that it'll be for 1 hour approximately, out of which the discussions will be for around 40 to 45 minutes. In the end, 15 minutes, we will have a polls and Q&A section. So we'll be running quick polls where we just have about 3 questions, and we would love if everybody would participate. After that, we'll be running a Q&A where if you see on your screen, you'll be able to see the Q&A box on the left hand side of the screen. So after we're done with today's webinar, if you have any questions pertaining to this topic, you can put your questions in the Q&A box. And our speakers, which is Mr. Swami and Mr. Ashwin, they will be addressing your questions in those 15 minutes. And now I will give Mr. Swami the lead, who will be presenting along with Mr. Ashwin. So yeah, Mr. Swami.
Thank you, Arva. Very good afternoon and good evening to all, wherever you are. Welcome you for this webinar on ISO 27002-2022 New Controls Implementation Guidelines. This is a second part 2 webinar, where in the part 1 we have covered, this is the agenda of our program today. We have covered some of the controls pertaining to administration and organizational and physical controls on the previous webinar on August 10. And also today we are going to cover mostly on the technological controls. As you all aware that ISO 27002-2022 has been released in February 2022. As part of this 2013, when compared to 2013 and 2022, there were 114 controls which were merged and collaborated and made as 94 controls, of which 11 new controls have been introduced as part of this. If you look at in the new controls, these controls are divided into organizational controls, people controls, and physical controls and technological controls. When we talk about people controls, there is no new controls introduced on that. So when we talk about technological controls, whatever controls that are there, we will be going to see in detail today. Now, going to about a small introduction about Ashwin. Ashwin, we are a Denver-based Colorado a licensed CPA firm focusing on SSAE SOC 2 reports, and also focusing on cloud data security and private security. We have an associated office in Mumbai. We have also a listed auditors in PCAOB and also on CSA, and we are also an ISO IEC certification body. Only few entities worldwide can provide SOC 2 and ISO in single brand, and we are proud to be one among them. And we are also listed empaneled auditors for certain to perform website audits and penetration testing and other related aspects. Our CEO, Mr. Ashwin Chaudhary, he is actually has 20 years of experience. He has got wealth of experience in cyber security and data security, cloud related areas. He's a qualified CPA and MBA, and also he has got a lot of certifications in terms of data security, privacy, and SOC 2 also. Yeah. And if you look at it, he has been instrumental in setting up the architecture for cybersecurity in large organizations. Also concentrated in terms of conducting assessments on SOC 2, C5, CCM controls, and other related areas. He has recently delivered a session on ISACA Mumbai chapter on digital trust through zero trust security. and he is giving a lot of presentations and seminars as during his period. Yeah. Now it is Swaminathan, myself. I am the audit delivery head at Asdir. I have 37 years of experience in IT industry and 10 plus years in GRC area, and I'm a qualified MCA. And also, I worked certified ISO 27000K lead auditor. And also engaged in CCSK, conducting CCS cloud security assessments, SOC 2 assessments. And I have achieved, or rather, instrumental in getting certifications for organizations, and also monitored a lot of ISMS implementation and conducted a lot of audits in ISMS and SOC 2 requirements. Now, coming to the controls covered on August 10, 2022, as I already said, we have covered organizational controls and physical controls, where we talked about threat intelligence and the importance of threat intelligence, the importance of information security when you try to use the cloud services, what are all the specific things that we need to take into account while we taking the services of cloud services. And also we have taken into account that the ICT readiness for business continuity. And also we have seen on physical security and monitoring how to perform those things. Now, today we will be covering on technological controls around it will be consisting of configuration management, information deletion, data masking, data leakage prevention, monitoring activities, web filtering, and secure coding. These are all the controls that we are planning to cover today. As part of this, first and foremost important thing is that configuration management. Configuration management is primarily for all assets that you have, hardware, software, networks, and other applications. Everything we need to configure them. They are all configurable items. When we call configurable items, they can be changed at any point in time with all kinds of changes that is happening in the environment. Based on the environmental changes, you may have to undergo some changes in the systems. For that, we have to have an important aspect of configuration management control to be implemented. Basically, this is to ensure that hardware software services are working as it is supposed to work, and also ensure that they are not being modified by any unauthorized means. So this is the request important aspect of this configuration management system. People who are familiar with ITIL, they maybe know about CMDB, configuration management database, which will be covering all the will hold all the configurations related to hardware, software, networks, and documents. And as part of this, as you are aware that in ISO, we generally follow the Plan, Do, Check, Act. As part of this, we need to implement, or we need to prepare first for ourselves to implement configuration management system. For that, we need to come out with your policies and procedures, your roles and responsibilities, who is going to do what. All that need to be ensured. And also we need to come out with some metrics to ensure that the control that we implemented is effective as part of the implementation. So these are all the things that we will be covering. And then next, if you look at it, as I already said, that we need to come out with your policies and procedures. All that, it's just not enough you come out with your policies and procedures and leave it. And we need to come out with your configurable items also. We need to identify the configurable items, and also need to manage and need to have baseline controls in place. First and foremost control will be the baseline, and then the subsequent versions needs to be maintained, so that at any point in time, whenever we want to use any kind of asset, we are sure that we are using the right version at the right place at the right time. So we need to do all that. For that, configuration management is one of the important topic. And when we talk about changes that you want to make to those configurable items, we need to have a standard configure change management process. when you have change management process, then there has to be a request made, and then the request needs to be approved. Based on the person who is approving needs to look out what are all the risks that are going to happen. If I'm going to approve this change, will there be any risk? And if there is some risk, then they have to put an mitigation controls around that, and then ensure and then approve that change. And the implementation has to happen before the change is implemented in the production environment. We need to test it in our testing environment and ensure everything is working fine, and then move it to the production. If you look at it as part of this configurable management system, the life cycle is that at periodical intervals we need to provide the status report, and also we need to ensure that configurable or configuration audits are happening as part of periodical way. And also, one of the important aspect before any configurable change that is taking place, we need to ensure that we are hardening the system. We need, first and foremost thing, when any asset comes in, we need to harden the system. What is hardening? Hardening means that nothing but we have to remove all default user IDs and passwords. We need to have a your own user ID and password, which will enable that it will avoid any kind of hacking and other things from external world. So the type of things that we will be doing as part of system hardening. And if you look at it, the NIST SP 800-128 guide is also giving about security focused configuration management system. Basically, configuration management is not only talk about the changes that you make to the environment, to the system or to the network, but also how you are going to securely keep those assets intact, so that we will be able to ensure that there is no untoward incidents, security incidents happens to our environment. Now, coming back to the Ashwin, could you like to add your views, please?
Yeah, thank you, Swami. Thank you for the elaborate explanation. I will add some industry perspective to what you just said. Now, configuration management also applies across the entire infrastructure, right? From your operating systems, your across all 7 layers, right? Specifically now, if you look at the cloud environments, right? You've got Docker, you've got Kubernetes, that is also part of your infrastructure for the cloud CSPs. Now, many organizations download the open source systems and build on it, right, without even bothering to lock down or hardening the open source systems what they have downloaded, just relying on the default configurations of the third parties. So configuration systems also involves the end-to-end management of your entire life cycle, right from your open source items and to what you build on it, in terms of the change management, config management, and the entire versioning itself. So even versioning is in terms related to configuration management, because you may change your environment and you do not change your architecture diagrams, your documentation, etc. It has no meaning, right? The versioning system will change. The config management has to match with your versioning system of your documentation. Many environments we see that the systems have changed, but the network diagram is still not updated, right? So that is a mismatch, and it has to match across your entire 7 layers or your entire IT stack. That's what I wanted to add. Thank you, Swami. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ashwin. Thank you, Ashwin. Now, the next important control is information deletion. As we all know that we are dealing with a lot of information in the organization, and some of the information may not be required for us at some point in time or other, and also the information needs to be maintained as per the regulatory requirements. Basically, if you look at it, some of the documents and some of the information we need to maintain for a period of time more than 7 years, 5 years, and things like that. So we have to come out whenever we have information. We need to come out with our information classification, and then also we need to come out with the disposal period, when the information can be disposed of, what is the amount of time that we need to retain the information, data retention policy all those things needs to be taken into account when we are implementing this control. When the importance of this control is to prevent the importance of this control is to prevent unnecessary exposure of sensitive information. What are all the sensitive information? It can be your PII information, your PHI information, and your credit card information that you are processing. All that related informations needs to be secured. And once those informations which are processed and it has lost its life, then they have to be removed from the system to avoid any kind of unnecessary data breach or data loss or whatever you can say. Okay, so this is the importance, as you said, as usual. We need to plan, we need to come out with your information deletion process, and there are different type of deletion methods available. We need to come out with what are all the deletion methods that we are planning to use based on the information stored in the various devices and storage media and things like that. And we need to come out with our necessary metrics related things, and also if anything that's going wrong, where we need to ensure that we are having a corrective action and then doing the corrective steps. Now, coming back to this, as I was telling, that we need to ensure that we identify all the security sensitive information which is no longer required, and we need to select appropriate deletion methods based on the storage of the data and the classification of the data. And also, we need to we should try to automate the information deletion process and consider the legal and statutory requirements for retaining the information that is processed and to be retained. And also, it is important to retain a record of evidence that the information processed which are no longer required are being deleted and it is no more available in the system. So we need to have evidences towards that also, which will be come in handy, and that is going to be the objective evidence for the assessing the information deletion control. And what are all the different types of deletion mechanism that you can have? Basically, physically, you can destroy the hard disk if the information stored in hard disks or in the USB drive, or should not be go in the wrong hands. Then you probably have to destroy them. And also, this the thing which you are destroying, you cannot recover back anything. And also, whenever you are using, you can also use the purge and clear techniques for clearing the information. And one of the important aspect that when we need to consider here is that we are trying to take third party help in terms of storing our information and things like that. And also, nowadays we are using cloud services. So what we need to ensure that even though you may be making a request to your third party to remove that information and give confirmation, but still it is our responsibility to ensure that we get the confirmation from the third party in terms of information is deleted after its life cycle. And also, these are all the things we can see that it's in for cloud related things you can refer to 27017, and also information deletion of PII, how it needs to be followed, that you can refer to 27555. And also you can refer to data sanitation guidelines given by NIST. uh, and that's it. Mr. Ashwin, could you please
Yeah.
add?
Thank you, Swami. Thank you. Just to add some more industry perspective to this issue. Now, if you see the 27002 also includes privacy. Now, information deletion is important from the 7 principles of privacy perspective also. Because in the past, what we have seen across the globe, organizations keeping the data and don't delete the data. So as part of the privacy requirements, we need to only keep the data for as long as we need. We cannot keep it outside the purview of the requirement, the legal requirement, or whatever as per the business needs itself, right? So you have to align this information deletion along with your data flow, along with from the time you're collecting the data, from the time it is getting deleted, right? the whole end-to-end cycle of data process has to be aligned based on your data retention requirements itself. So for the day you collect, you define your retention period, and across the entire life cycle, of course, you will also put controls on the data itself, but the data deletion thought process has to start at the time when you collect the data and not after that. That's what I wanted to add, because many organizations just keep keeping the data in data, and in case the data is lost and not deleted, there are so many implications to that in terms of GDPR, in terms of privacy compliances, in terms of fines, which you have seen in the news every day. Right? That's it I want to add. Thank you, Swami. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ashwin. The next important topic is on data masking. What are the data masking is nothing but a data whatever stored should not be made known to people, and it should be uh, identified by personally identified information and sensitive informations that you are storing, which should not be made known to people at the time when they're trying to have access to the data and things like that. Considering that we also following the same plan do check act, here also we need to come out with your data masking techniques. What are all the various techniques that you want to use? Various techniques that are anonymization, pseudonymization, and substitution, and other related aspects we need to take into account while implementing this particular control. When we talk about that, what are all the things that we need to protect from, what are all the data that we need to mask? There are PI data, personally identifiable health related data, and PCI DSS data, that's cardholders data, and all users. Basically, no, it should not be that all users can have access to all data. People should have access. As we see, we generally implement least privilege controls will be implemented. The same needs to be implemented here also, especially with reference to PI data. When data are be stored in the production environment and also in test environment, whenever data are stored in production environment, the pseudo anonymization techniques can be used. Whenever we use in test environment, you have to use anonymization techniques where people cannot even identify, and the changes that you do, the mask techniques that you use will not allow people to reverse it back also. So that is important, because the people who are involved in doing the testing and things like that, they should not know what is the data and for whom they are doing the processing and other related aspects. And even the encryption, nulling out, substitution, replacing the values with their hash value, all these things are important. And from the protection of PI data, we have to refer to ISO IEC 27018. De-identification techniques also been talked about in the standard 2080-89. And also the data masking can be static when data is masked in original database itself, and also dynamic, it is using at the time of processing and things like that, and on the fly with data masked in an application's memory. It's not been changed or done at the data level, but at the application level this gets changed. Yeah. And if you look at it, this is the example that I wanted to give you. This where we have using a substitution technique. All account number which can be made use to identify a person, and that can be used. We can use the substitution technique. If you look at the normal numerical data, they substituted with all lines, and also in case of name they have substituted with X. And you all know that we generally used to get our credit card statements, where in the statements not all the card details will be provided except the last four digits will be printed. So with this, the data masking techniques we can able to use. Now coming back to the data as Ashwin, you want to add your industry perspective, please?
Yeah, thank you, Swami. So just to remind everybody that Reserve Bank of India has recently come out with tokenization. So all account details, cardholder data, debit card data needs to be now tokenized, right? This is a form of masking itself, right? Even at the industry level, Whatever is the PIA data, we must ensure that it is masked, it is pseudo-anonymized or anonymized, right? So that only the most people, I mean, the directly people who are relevant to look at the data in its original format must have only to look at it. Otherwise, you may have implications such as the privacy implication we just discussed, GDPR, CCP, etc. And if the data is lost, misplaced, or misused, right, it may fall into the wrong hands. And if the unencrypted data is leaked out, you may be prone to ransomware attacks, and you may be able to prone to blackmail, etc. And of course, the penal provisions across the various regulations are always there to be afraid of. So it's very important that we do our data masking, anonymization, or pseudo-anonymization strategies right, and it is good to consult somebody before you do that going forward. Thank you, Swami. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Ashwin. Now, the next important topic is about data leak prevention. Data leakage prevention or data loss prevention is one of the important aspects where it need to be detect, and then we need to identify the channels of data that can get leaked, and we need to arrest them with proper tools. And if you take into account, most of us are trying to use the online cloud-based email services like Office 365 and Gmail and other related aspects, where the DLP is inbuilt for them. Basically, if you are having an on-prem email servers and things like that, then there has to be a DLP tool implemented in the email gateway and also on the endpoint systems and other aspects of it. And it is important that as we are is the ISO 9000, ISO 27002 controls we are implementing, we need to follow the plan, do, check, act. We need to have policies and procedures in place. What are all the sources of which from where possible data leak can happen, and we need to arrest those areas by putting appropriate controls in place. And also we need to see that whenever any data leak prevention happens, there has to be an alert triggered to the appropriate people, and there has to be a security incident raised on this, because this is one of the important aspect. And basically, without having proper disciplinary action and things like that are not taken against the people, however amount of training we give, any kind of disciplinary action and things like that process are not in place, then implementing these controls and other things will not be will not be effective. Okay, so when we talk about, we need to identify how many people are doing this type of, basically people who are leaving the organization, they generally try to take everything from them. The problem here is that why these data should not be taken out, it involves intellectual property rights. Whatever process, whatever data, whatever code that developed by the programmers for the organization, it is the property of the organization and they need to be protected well. And also it should not be copied by anybody. And it's because people are developing, putting their efforts, they are being paid for that. So by saying that it is being developed by me, so I'm ready, I can take it with me, is not the right argument. And we have to make them people understand that it is the intellectual property of the organization, and any information that are intellectual property right of the organization needs to be protected. Similarly, the PI data, the sensitive information, all that needs to be protected. And also we should ensure that people should not be able to control copy paste and other related aspects. And also we need to ensure that people should not be able to do a screenshot, and people should not able to take photography of video or the things what they are doing and things like that. Further, the compensating control is that to ensure that people are not allowed to carry their mobiles inside the organization. All that needs to be implemented as part of the preventive and corrective actions for data leak prevention. Now, data leak prevention primarily applies to systems, networks, devices that stores data and transmit data, and also to detect and prevent unauthorized data. And if you look at it, email, email is one of the sources from where people who are developing the thing, they will, people will sending the emails to their personal email ID for, for their future reference or for future thing, is not allowed. And there we need to put the DLP tool in place. And also in terms of file transfer, whenever we use the file transfer, we need to ensure that none of the data are getting transferred to any of the unnecessary areas and things like that. And also mobile devices, whenever we use, you should not allow people to download data when they use the office network to their mobile devices. And we have to put MDM in place, and also ensure that even by chance if they worked on the work profile and then they are downloading it, when the system is, when they are leaving the organization, we need to ensure that their data which are there stored in their mobiles are removed. All that MDM, all this controls needs to be implemented. And portable storage devices like USB, you should not allow anybody to use USB should be blocked, Bluetooth should be blocked, all that. If you see, the action for prevention is you can quarantine the emails, you can prevent copying from mobile devices and prevent all that things. What are the other actions is that prevent copy paste, prevent taking screenshot photographs and other things. Deploy access controls and secure document data management controls. Also we need to put all the data that are there, we need to have proper access control. Only people who are allowed to have access should be able to have access to those data and things like that. All these needs to be implemented. Now, looking at this development, DLP management, there are four areas where we need to concentrate. As on the network side, we have to look at the email and the FTP, and at the storage level, at the file server level and database level, we need to ensure that no data is getting transferred without proper information and things like that. And also we need to ensure that Office 365 and Gmail, they have their own DLP installed as part of that, so it is taken care. Any kind of DLP incidents are happening, then probably we need to come out with our proper action items and things like that. And also virtual desktops and removable storage, these are all the important aspect that we need to cover as part of our data leak prevention. Ashwin, would you like to add your
Yes, yes, Swami, thank you. So DLP has been a discussion point and one of the most difficult tools to implement for the entire past 10-15 years of my cybersecurity journey. Initially, people thought that by implementing a semantic tool or trend micro tool or McAfee tool, DLP can be eliminated and controlled. But half of those implementations till date were never successful, and DLP was never effective till date. And with the cloud coming in, the complexity of DLP has further increased. There's no LAN, the LAN has gone. People are working from home. There are no controls in the cloud aspect. Gmail has there's no default DLP to my knowledge in Gmail and etc. And there is a challenges, and unless you install solutions like Zscaler or other cloud controls, etc. If you just give people home access and people work from their home, open access, open internet, the DLP doesn't have any meaning at all in these days today. So again, with the COVID situation and cloud situation has increased the complexity, and this is one of the biggest challenges that people have today. People say we are in the cloud, we are in the cloud. Easy to say that, but taking care of DLP uh, is the same difficult challenge that we had almost 20 years back. It's the same system. So we are in the same situation. The situation is never gone easy, and we need to see how we can resolve this at every entity level. Yes, Swami, go ahead. Thank you, sir.
thank you, Ashwin. Now, the
Swami, we lost you.
yeah, 1 second, Ashwin, just a minute.
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, it's some um, yeah. Sorry for the interruption. 8.16 monitoring activities. Monitoring activities is one of the important aspect in any information security management system implementation. Monitoring is not only monitoring the logs and networks and systems and other things, but also how processes are implemented and things like that. We need to ensure that uh, periodical audits are happening, assessments are happening on the process implementation and things like that. These are also coming part of the monitoring activities. The purpose of monitoring activities is primarily to detect any unsolicited activities or behavior are happening in the information security incidents, and also any potential information security incidents is going to come up in the system. Yeah, this is the purpose. And as we said, we need to follow the plan, do, check, act, and we need to come out with your monitoring activities. What are all the various monitoring activities that we need to put in place, and how we are going to implement, and we need to ensure that how many amount of preventive and corrective controls we are implementing, and corrective actions we need to come out with. Okay? Now, coming back to the monitoring activities, what are all the things that we need to monitor? Primarily, this 8.16 concentrates on the log monitoring and other related aspects of it. So monitoring is at the highest level. It involves in all levels. Basically, if you look at it, at the risk management level, we need to have a monitoring. At operation level, we need to have a monitoring. At all levels, we need to have monitoring activities. But this particular monitoring activities is primarily focusing on network related aspects, systems, application, and system capacity. Basically, no, we always need to look at whether we are having the required capacity for ensuring our systems are available to our customers at what point in time as per our commitments gave. Basically, for that, we need to ensure that a continuous monitoring is enabled in the system, and any kind of violation and the capacity utilization and things like that needs to be alerted, and people need to ensure that taking corrective action immediately. Okay, that is one of the important aspect. And then all these things can be continuously monitored. Manually monitoring is a small organization, it is okay, but for medium sized and big organizations, it is recommended to go with SIM tools and implement, so that we can configure the tool in order to ensure which are all the possible incidents that may come up for our environment, by looking at the logs and looking at the antivirus logs, IDS, IPS, web filters, DLP logs, and application logs. Even event logs also need to be looked at. So considering all these combination of all these log monitoring will give us an preventive mechanism to prevent any kind of information security incidents to our environment. Now, looking at this thing, NIC has given with ASP 800-137 organization-wide information security continuous monitoring. Okay, this is important process where we need to have, it's again, it's a as we said, monitoring is also has its own life cycle. We need to define what to monitor, how to monitor, what is that we are going to do if something goes wrong, or something is not meeting the requirements of our objectives of the organization, as well as with reference to information security management system implementation. So these are all the things. And then whatever happening is that the collection and the correlation and analysis and reporting needs to happen at all levels in order to ensure that the monitoring is effective. Now, coming back to, sorry, Ashwin, would you like to add?
Yes, Swami, thank you. So, as Swami highlighted the importance of monitoring, I also would like to emphasize the linking of monitoring to your risk management and assessment. When you do a risk assessment, you make sure that all your risks are listed down. not just for the sake of it, for the sake of managing the risk and not from a certification perspective. We see a lot of companies just having 10 risks and so high default values high, put X control, and the risk becomes low without even monitoring. So that is not the objective here. The objective is the risk has to become low only when you have monitored and you have actually seen that the risk is the controls are effectively operating and the risk indeed is low, not just because you need to fill on the sheet and we are monitoring this. And the whole idea of monitoring is to monitor your end-to-end environment, end-to-end, the entire stack, the entire 7 layers of OSI, the entire infrastructure, the entire all the activities. They have to align to the risk management, to the monitoring, to configuration management, to change management, and version history and everything. So all of these activities have to remain aligned in your organization. It cannot be made in silos because the risk team does the risk management, the monitoring team does the IT, and the compliance team does something else. So the whole gambit of operations have to sync, and the monitoring in terms of audit, in terms of logs, in terms of incidents, in terms of risk, in terms of performance, everything has to be aligned within the entity. That is the objective that the standard intends organizations to do. Thank you, Swami. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Ashwin. Now, the next important aspect is web filtering. As you all know that we are in the cloud environment and more internet we are using. We without having control on web filtering, we will not be able to sustain our operations. And it is primarily to protect system from being compromised by malware and to prevent access to unauthorized web resources. Basically, what we need to ensure here is that we need to ensure that people should have access only to those websites which are safe, which are important for doing the business requirements. Basically, just enabling people to have an open internet is not going to help the organization in their productivity or anything of that sort. It is still going to worsen their situation. And also they need to ensure that people are using the internet only for business requirements. And all those things we may be telling them, all the things we may be telling during our training and other things, but still there has to be a monitoring mechanism in place, and a tool need to be implemented. Web filtering tools needs to be implemented and ensure that they are monitored. And any kind of violations, people going visiting the particular website for some reason or other, is it really for business reasons or not, we need to identify. And for that we need to have an incident reporting for people who are visiting an unauthorized sites and things like that. So that logs needs to be evaluated. There comes the monitoring. There again, that needs to be ensured that the proper incident is raised, and then incident investigation happened and corrective action has been taken, and people are being informed how to go about and things like that. Okay, so now when we talk about the web filtering, here also we need to have what are all the websites that people should have access, what they should do, what they should not do, all that we need to have. And people who are going to the websites, how many people are visiting unauthorized sites, or trying to have access to those sites which are filtered in our tool. All that needs to be monitored, and corrective action need to be taken. Now, coming back to the web filtering, as I was telling, that we have to reduce the risk of accessing malicious websites. Basically, some of the sites are with malicious contents. So if your people are going to go and then have access to that malicious sites and try to download some of the malicious content into our network, then we are going to be in trouble. So we need to ensure that that's not happening. So we need to identify which websites they should have, which categories of sites they should have. Having an access to entertainment site is not a problem, but they should not get into wrong sites. So we need to protect which are all the categories of sites we can allow. All that need to be done through the web filtering tool, and establish the rules for safe use of online resources. And also that it's also there is a problem when we try to download. If you are trying to give people an open access to download anything and everything, if suppose some of them are licensed and some of them are licensed items, and we are trying to download and trying to use it for our business requirements, then we will be end up into other complications. So this is the important aspect where we need to take into account all this. And also we need to configure our web filter tools to prevent malicious attacks. And also we need to create security incidents for any violation. That is important. Basically, unless and otherwise, as we said, therefore anything and everything we need to have disciplinary actions and things like that set. So by looking at the incidents, we will able to know what type of sites people are visiting and which are creating problems for us, so that we will try to minimize by putting the controls in the web filtering tool. This is one of the other aspect that we wanted to cover. That's it from my side. Ashwin, would you like to add your
Yes,
industry?
yeah. So I'll add some industry perspective on the web filtering also. So it is easy said and difficult achieved, because despite your firewalls and IDSs and IPSs, right, most of these tools that you implement, they only do a blacklisting based on their classification, like classic maybe entertainment or political or cloud or whatever the classification those tools do that based on so and so. So those classifications are never right. Despite whatever you block or classify, these you always need to evolve and monitor and look at the dashboards and reports, what people are actually doing, what is that being downloaded, what is that being used, because those classifications are never accurate. And every day we have new websites and hundreds of websites, thousands, hundreds and thousands of websites coming up every day. And it takes time for those firewalls and other tools, web filtering tools, to analyze and really analyze and classify them. Invariably, I've seen the classification is incorrect. So you have to have other methods and mechanisms. The systems are in place and the monitoring actually happens. Many IT administrators are overwhelmed with their current work, and many do not even look at the dashboards and the reports that the firewall system provides. It's there. I have configured this to block this, but this blockage changed. Every day, new sites are coming up. The configuration has changed. You have to periodically evolve, periodically monitor, periodically look at the dashboards, right? Which many IT companies and IT administrators still don't do. These tools, firewalls, Sophos, whatever you use, they do provide a lot of good dashboards, a lot of good fine tuning, but we need to be after it to keep on doing it. Doing it once and leaving it doesn't make sense, right? In any environments also, right? If you see there was no blockage firewalls, the rule is any. What is the use of that firewall? So if you put a web filtering and do not monitor and do not actively look at it, it has no meaning. That's what I wanted to communicate. Thank you, Swami. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ashwin. Now, the last and important aspect is secure coding, where all software development lifecycle, throughout the software development lifecycle, we need to implement security in place. Basically, whenever we identify customer requirements, we will come out with functional requirements and non-functional requirements. The non-functional requirement security is one of the non-functional requirement, where we need to put our mind in terms of ensuring security is inbuilt in our design itself. What are all the practices that we need to follow, and all that need to be documented, need to be communicated to the respective developers. All developers, whenever they develop their code, they should follow the secured practices given, and they should be trained on all those areas, like OWASP, top 10 vulnerabilities, how to address, and also some of the things which was given by NIST on the secure software development framework. What are all the controls that they say, all that need to be taken into account when we are trying to implement the secure coding aspect of it. Here also, we also going to have a plan do check act. Here, what are the plan that we need to have? If you look at it, it's a life cycle. Again, We need to come, even in the requirement stage, we need to completely understand what is the business requirements, what are all the possible threats that we have, and what are all the controls that we need to put in the application to mitigate those risks that are coming up. All that need to be taken into account when we were designing the application. And also, the codes that are developing, they should have secured coding practices, and they need to follow different for each language. The codes are different, the patterns are different. We need to get ourselves ensured and get ourselves trained, and also need to implement them. It is not enough that you put all the codes into the application and leave it. The main important aspect here is testing. Without having proper testing in place, we will not be able to come out with all we will not be able to identify the vulnerabilities that are there. So what we need to do, it's not only you do the functional testing, we also need to do security testing, like static application security testing and dynamic application security testing. All that need to be inside, and then penetration testing, application vulnerability testing, all these needs to be done to ensure that the code that you developed are secure. It is also important from our perspective that whenever we outsource any of our software development activity, we need to ensure that even our software developers, vendors, are also following the secure coding techniques, and they are being given with all the relevant information, and they also should be made aware that they have to follow this. All these points that we need, what we need to ensure for secure coding, also need to be communicated to the vendor people in terms of agreement and other aspects of it, okay, in other ways. So this is important aspect, and we need to take care that all our application that we develop are not having any kind of vulnerability, and they are not creating any kind of unpleasant situation or create incidents to the environment. Okay, that is thing. And then if you see this secure coding, if you look at it, we have to prepare secure development policy, secured software development procedure, follow the best practices given in OWASP and SSDF of NIST, and also conduct application vulnerability test and penetration test, and also ensure all application security requirements are followed even when we giving the activity to the third party. Ashwin, would you like to add your view,
Yes,
please?
just quickly, I'll add one sentence that even today, despite so many years of cybersecurity, so many applications are being hosted on the cloud, in public platform, in production, without doing VAPT, even today, which is not the best practice. And companies, for the sake of pushing to the market, they don't care about your data, they don't care about security, they just push the application into the production environment without doing VAPT, which is really, really bad for the industry, for the environment. And I would urge everybody, whosoever it is, whether it's a website or whether it's application, please do a third party VAPT before putting your applications onto the production platform. Yeah, so go ahead, Swami, with the question. I think we can go
Okay.
ahead with the questions and
Yeah,
other
yeah.
aspects. Yeah.
Thank
Because
you,
you're already
Ashwin.
late. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Ashwin. Uh, so this
Hello.
is a disclaimer. Yeah, I
Yeah.
want to give a disclaimer.
No,
Basically,
no, you can
whatever
continue.
whatever information that we have given is are all from our perspective and from our experience we are telling. Nothing is specific to any organization or any environment per se. So anything that you want, you can always contact us through info@asdear.io. We are more than happy to help you out in meeting your requirements. Thank you. Thank you, Arwa.
Okay. So thank you, Mr. Swami and Mr. Ashwin. That was a great presentation. Now for everybody, quickly, please, just if you can see, there is the polls have already started. There are 3 poll questions. Please just answer them, and then also in the Q&A section, please start putting your questions. One common question is that would we be sharing this recording of today's presentation. So yes, once we are done with the webinar, everybody on their email will be getting a recorded version of this webinar. So now please guys, quickly, once everybody's done with the polls, we can start addressing the questions also simultaneously.
So, the first question is on software development lifecycle. What is the software development lifecycle? First and foremost, for any software, we need to come out with requirements. And all the requirements, it's something like this. There are requirement phase, design phase, coding phase, testing phase, and implementation. And then post, we have to maintain the software. Okay, these are all the life cycle of the life cycle of the software development life cycle. At every stage, wherever we collect our requirements, we need to identify the required security related aspects also into account, and also that also need to be considered while we coming out with our design, coming out with our coding, and coming out with our testing and other aspects of it. This is what is on the software development lifecycle question. And Ashwin, would you like to take this question? Why is the web API is important?
Yes, yes, sure. So web API is important because the API does the all the data transfers between two applications or another thing. So whatever data is transferring from one application to the other or either way. So the data security is important, and that is the importance of API, because API carries data. The data may be PII data or confidential data or whatever the strict may be, as it's important to take care of the data via the API, and which is going to the third party. So next question is also, I'll take it, with difference between data masking and data encryption. So there are various tools and technologies to be done. It's a subject by its own, data masking. So data encryption is one of the technologies to do data masking. There are several tools and technologies, and I think the next few minutes will not be sufficient to explain you all the technologies, but data encryption is one of the data masking technologies. I would say that. So another question is why the government has withdrawn the data protection bill. I'm sorry, this is not our topic of discussion today, and I would like to park this question or keep it for something else when we discuss that, because we wouldn't like to comment on that. Honestly, it's not our our jurisdiction to comment on why it has been withdrawn. So I think we are in time, and if there are any additional questions, we can wait for 1 minute. If not, then we can close the session for today, right?
Yes, and also guys, please, I just see that a lot of people have still not done the polls, so I would like to urge everybody that please just give us some time, and just like there are just 3 questions, so please like just fill in the polls. And also, yeah, we are just going to wait like for about a minute, so if you have any questions, just please post it in the Q&A box.
So there's one last question I will take. Why is secure programming necessary for application development, as Swami just mentioned? Because secure programming is necessary to take care of the open vulnerabilities and possibility of functionality issues also. So the secure programming is important to take care of the top OS and other secure vulnerabilities which shouldn't exist in a production environment, to cut it short, right? And that is the reason we do a VAPT and penetration testing to make sure that the vulnerabilities in the production environment are not there. I think with that said, and we do not have, so Alva, we can thank everybody and we can close this.
Yes. So thank you everybody, and as mentioned before, you guys will get a recording of this webinar, and I would like to thank everybody for being a part of today's session and our speakers as well. And please, you can keep following us on LinkedIn for our upcoming webinars. And that's it. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you everybody. Thank you, Swami. Thank you, Eva. Thank you everybody for joining
Thank
in.
you.
See
Yeah,
you next
thank
time.
you everybody. Thank you
Thank
everybody
you.
for joining.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.